Michigan, Iowa. Let's match them up right here at the Voice of College Football. Please like the video, share these videos out on social media, and subscribe. Best discussion, debate, and analysis of college football right here because of your contribution, your participation. So we appreciate you being here. Hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live, which is every day. All right. It's been a long time for both the Wolverines and the Hawkeyes in winning the Big Ten championship. Michigan has never played in a Big Ten championship game, which goes back to the inaugural 2011 season. Michigan State, Wisconsin in that one. And Michigan last won the Big Ten championship in 2004, advancing to the Rose Bowl against Texas. For Iowa, they played in one Big Ten championship game in 2015. Narrow loss to Michigan State in that one. The Hawkeyes last won the Big Ten as co-champions with Ohio State back in 2002. So this will be a first for Michigan or Iowa going back to 2004 or 2002. And the Wolverines, a 10.5-point favorite, coming off an 11-1 regular season. The one loss to Michigan State on the road, of course, blowing a 16-point third-quarter lead, losing 37-33 in a thriller. Iowa lost back-to-back games to Purdue 24-7 and Wisconsin 27-7 midseason. Rebounded, got some help from the Badgers, or more so the Gophers on the final weekend of the season to advance to the Big Ten championship game. The Wolverines a 10.5-point favorite in this one. Because the Big Ten has a format of 3 cross-division games for each team, Michigan and Iowa share 6 common opponents. Let's run down those games and compare the Hawkeyes' performance against these 6 teams versus Michigan, starting with the most important game, that being against Wisconsin. Michigan made its first splash on the season with a big October 2nd win at Wisconsin after losing its previous 5 trips to Camp Randall Stadium. Michigan won 38-17, breaking open a close 13-10 halftime game. Graham Mertz completed a couple Elite 11-looking passes at the end of the first half to draw the Badgers close. Michigan dominated the second half. Hassan Haskins, only 19 carries, 47 yards in his worst performance of the season, 2.5 yards per carry, but that's not uncommon against Wisconsin's rush defense, as Michigan, as a team, averaged only 2.5 yards per attempt. Braylon Allen, before he was Braylon Allen, 5 carries, 19 yards for the Badgers, as Wisconsin could only muster 1.3 yards per carry against the Michigan rush defense, 32 carries, 43 yards. Graham Mertz, again, 8 for 15 before he was ushered out of the game due to a chest injury and replaced by Chase Wolf. Michigan dominated defensively again in third down defensive efficiency, limiting Wisconsin to only 3 conversions in 14 attempts. Michigan outgained Wisconsin on the ground by 67 yards, by 86 yards through the air. Going into the game, Michigan was running the ball 74% of the time. In this one, they threw it 30. This is their first breakout game through the air as they open up the playbook, threw it 30 out of 74 plays against Wisconsin. Turnover margin also went to Michigan 3-1, and Michigan, as a 2-point underdog, wins at Wisconsin for the first time since the early 2000s, 38-17. Iowa at Wisconsin, a much different affair for the Hawkeyes in taking on the Badgers. They trailed 20-0 at halftime, could do nothing offensively. Only 2 first downs and 17 total yards of offense, trailing 20-0 on October 20th. Iowa ran it 30 times for 24 yards against Wisconsin, less than 1 yard per carry. Tyler Goodson, 13 carries, 27 yards against the Badgers defense. Braylon Allen didn't do much against Michigan, but he sure did against the Hawkeyes. 20 carries for 104 yards. Wisconsin forced 3 turnovers and had 6 sacks against Iowa. The Badgers really never threatened in this game, won it big over the Hawkeyes, and it looked for a long time like this would decide the Big Ten Western Division representative in the Big Ten championship game, as Wisconsin won it 27-7. The second most important game for each of these teams in comparing the Hawkeyes and the Wolverines would be both of their trips to Nebraska. This is why. It was the Wolverines' first test of the season, And, of course, for the Hawkeyes, it was at their most recent performance against a team that, yes, went 3-9 and 1-8 in the Big Ten, but, again, played everyone tough all the way up to Oklahoma, Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State. For the Wolverines, they pulled it out 32-29. They trailed by 3 points going into the fourth quarter in this one. Hassan Haskins, 21 carries for $123 and 2 touchdowns. And Michigan averaged 4.9 yards per carry against Nebraska and racking up 204 yards on the ground. Jake Moody won it with a 39-yard field goal with 3.5 minutes, or rather 1:24 left on the clock after Brad Hawkins stripped Adrian Martinez, forced the fumble, and it set up the Moody field goal to win it. Nebraska did rack up 431 yards of total offense against Michigan as they kept it close, almost pulled it out, but Michigan won it on the forced fumble and field goal late, 32-29 over Nebraska. Just this past weekend, it looked like the Huskers were going to finally beat a ranked team, beat a good team. Scott Frost is now 0-14 against ranked teams at Nebraska, but the Huskers could not hold on to a 21-6 third quarter lead, 22 consecutive points for the Hawkeyes, and they win it 28-21 to again win the West once Minnesota beat Wisconsin. Iowa scored the last 22 points, but only one offensive touchdown in this one. The Hawkeyes blew 2 scoring opportunities in this one. They had a dropped pass by Sam Laporta at the goal line on a 4th down play that was initially called a touchdown on the field, but it was reversed due to replay. Didn't say that he held on to the ball long enough. And then in the third quarter, Tyler Goodson fumbled at the Nebraska 6 in the third quarter. Goodson did have a big day, 23 carries for $156 against Nebraska. Once it was 21-6 Nebraska, the Hawkeye defense and special teams took over. They had a block punt for a touchdown. Then they forced a fumble, scored a safety, forced a punt by Nebraska, and then the interception to seal it for the Hawkeyes. Spencer Petras led the comeback on offense, although it was mostly fueled again by the special teams and the defense. Petras hit on 7 of 13 throws and relieving Alex Padilla in this one. And Petras also had 102 yards passing. Hawkeyes beat Nebraska 28-21, coming back from 21-6 down. On to the Penn State game. First for Michigan. They won it 21-17 just a couple weeks ago in Happy Valley, trailing much of the game. In fact, Penn State reeled off 33 plays to Michigan's 6 in the first quarter. That's the biggest disparity of plays in any game in FBS football in 2021. 33 plays for Penn State, 6 for Michigan, but the Nittany Lions could not take advantage. Hassan Haskins, much like he did against Ohio State, wore down the Penn State defense. The Michigan offensive line just leaned on Penn State all day. Haskins, 31 carries for $156. Cade McNamara hit on 3 touchdown passes, 19 for 29, including the game winner with 3.5 minutes to play when he hit Eric All on a very creative play that brought all the way across the field to catch it and go the distance down the sideline, 47 yards for the game winner. Kevon Lee, 20 carries, 88 yards for Penn State. Doesn't seem like a huge day, but against the Michigan defense, and considering Penn State did not run the ball at all against anybody in the Big Ten this season, decent day against the Michigan rush defense there. Aiden Hutchinson, another enormous day for the Michigan defense. 3 sacks for him as Michigan harassed Sean Clifford all day, 23 of 43 for the Penn State quarterback. Michigan wins it late in Happy Valley, 21-17. Much earlier on the season in Iowa City, Hawkeyes and Nittany Lions. Iowa won a thriller, 23-20. Of course, they trailed in that one, 17-3. Sean Clifford knocked out of the game. That was the major storyline of this one, matching number 3 and number 4 teams in the country. And Traquan Roberson could not get it done for Penn State. He was a deer in headlights, pretty much shut down the Penn State offense from there. 17 of 21 for him, 2 picks and only 34 yards passing. Tyler Goodson earned his way to 88 yards rushing on 25 carries for the Iowa offense. Spencer Petras had a big day considering Iowa's typical passing numbers. 17 of 31 for 2 touchdowns. And the big game winner, 44 yards to Nico Reganey with 6 minutes left to play in the fourth quarter as Iowa pulled it out over Penn State 23-20. Our next most important comparison game is the Maryland outing. Michigan won it late in the season, just prior to the Ohio State game, 59-18. And Michigan totaled 352 yards passing, 151 rushing in this one. Donovan Edwards, the 5-star freshman running back, had a huge day as a receiver, 10 catches for $170 and a touchdown. DJ Turner had a pick 6 for Michigan as the Wolverines led it big early and stretched the lead out to 59-18 as a final on November 20th. Iowa broke onto the national scene for many on a Friday night nationally televised game that everyone saw. College Football Nation witnessed the Hawkeyes over the Terps in a big way, 51-14, as Maryland came into the game as only a 3-point favorite against an undefeated Iowa team. Talia Tagovailoa turned it over 7 times. This was the epic, classic example of Iowa's defense taking the football away and benefiting and taking advantage of turnover margin. The Iowa defense held Maryland to 271 total yards. Spencer Petras threw for 3 touchdowns and 283 yards through the air. The October 1st game goes Iowa's way in a big way, 51-14. Next up, let's compare the efforts of Michigan and Iowa against Northwestern. Michigan won it 33-7. It was a much closer game than that. In the first half, Michigan only led by 1 score before they broke it open in the second half at the Big House. Blake Corum had 119 yards rushing. Hassan Haskins, 110. Cade McNamara, a very efficient 20 of 27 passing. The Michigan defense was all over Northwestern, one of the worst offenses in the country. Evan Hall did have a 75-yard touchdown run for Northwestern, but that was it. Iowa with a much different outcome against Northwestern, although they won the game, but just 17-12 in this one against the Wildcats at Ryan Field. Alex Padilla, this was the first game that he took over at quarterback for Spencer Petras, hitting on 18 of 28 passes as Petras left after throwing just 4 passes. Dane Belton picked off a pass late that sealed the win, but it was a tough one for the Hawkeyes. They were coming off the 2-game losing streak and needed a win desperately. It was not a strong performance, but they got it done against Northwestern, 17-12. And finally, the last common opponent out of 6 between Michigan and Iowa would be the Indiana Hoosiers. Of course, at the point in which Iowa took on Indiana, it was a marquee game in the Big Ten as both teams started the season ranked in the top 20 in the nation. Riley Moss picked off 2 passes and took him to the house. 2 pick sixes to spark Iowa's win 34-6. Tyler Goodson took the 4th play of the game on offense for the Hawkeyes, 56 yards for a touchdown, and Iowa would not be denied 34-6 in this one and won it big. And, of course, Indiana has proven to be the worst team of the Big Ten, not winning a conference game, 0-8, 2-10 overall. Michigan's win over Indiana at 29-7, a very workmanlike fashion, as you can see right there from the numbers as the Wolverines took out Indiana. And Michael Penix at that point, who had thrown 3 picks against Indiana, was long gone as Indiana went to Jack Tuttle, the former 4-star from Utah, for much of the season, but then Darren McCauley and others took over at quarterback for Indiana, and Michigan won it at 29-7. So this is how the overall numbers stack up. Michigan versus Iowa and those 6 common opponents. Michigan won all 6 games. Iowa lost the 1 game to Wisconsin, so they went 5-1. Michigan outscored those 6 opponents by 117 points. Iowa outscored those 6 opponents by 60 points. First downs, Michigan plus 41, Iowa plus 10. On the ground, Michigan was dominant, out rushing those 6 opponents by 411 yards for Iowa, plus 139. Through the air, Michigan outgaining those 6 opponents by 403 yards, Iowa by 127. And the turnover margin, there you go. Iowa plus 12, that's the Hawkeyes calling card. Michigan with a plus 3 in those 6 games. You would have to say that Michigan's performed better against those 6 opponents than Iowa. The one outlier, of course, Michigan's dominant second half at Wisconsin in defeating Wisconsin 38-17, while the Hawkeyes were crushed by the Badgers 27-7 in a game in which they just couldn't do anything offensively. Otherwise, Michigan had the dominant performance, especially in the second half against Northwestern. Iowa struggled against the Wildcats. Otherwise, both beat up Maryland 59-18 and 51-14. Both got by Penn State, although Iowa was able to do it minus Sean Clifford and also at home, while Penn State was at home for the Michigan game, and Sean Clifford threw 43 passes in that game. The Indiana game, you got to say that Iowa took on a much different IU team that was fully stocked with Michael Penix at quarterback and 0 injuries in the opener at that point, as they were coming off an 6-2 season last year. And Michigan took on a depleted Indiana squad for a 29-7 win. Much like the Penn State and Wisconsin games, Nebraska, you would consider that to be a valid result. Both struggled to beat the Huskers in Lincoln. For Michigan, it took a late field goal with 90 seconds left. For Iowa, it was the big comeback from 15 down to knock out the hapless Huskers, who play close against everyone and beat no one. Your thoughts about the Michigan-Iowa comparison? We've lined it up against 6 opponents right here at the Voice of College Football. Please like the video, share these videos out on social media, and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football.